It's time for overtime.
Stop what you're doing and listen.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
And a drive to right. Good! The season has begun.
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
It's a late start to hour number 2 on this Tuesday, December 10th edition of Overtime. It's Bert Rameen back here with you. You can find me on Twitter at any time at BertESPN. Off and running, headlines and highlights on the way, as well as our conversation talking Iowa Hawkeye football and men's basketball. Sean Bock, Hawkeye coverage for 24/7 Sports, set to join us in hour 2. As also in this hour, we got the latest from the NFL, clinching scenarios for this weekend, and a current long look at the playoff field around the NFL. That got a little bit more dicey, a little bit more solidified last night. The Cowboys fall down a peg. The Bengals reinsert themselves into the conversation. A game-winning, self-inflicted blocked punt. Let me explain here. The Bengals were punting the football away. Former Bengal Nick Vigil, linebacker, comes in and blocks the punt. Big win for Dallas, right? Not so fast, my friend, as the ball skitters past the original line of scrimmage barely, and then a Cowboys defender wants to put his hands on it and deflects off of him right into the waiting arms of the Bengals. They scoop it up, get another first down, fresh set of downs, and Jamar Chase does the rest. Joe Burrow, 369 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bengals win 27-20. Mike McCarthy talking about his team falling short once again.
I feel terrible for the players because, they give you everything during the week, and it's been a bumpy ride without a doubt. So it's just really raw right now. So I just feel for those guys.
That's head coach Mike McCarthy. When it comes to the ever-evolving conversation of Mike McCarthy's future as the head coach of the Cowboys, here's the latest that Adam Schefter can provide.
Shaky, tenuous. We didn't need last night's result to change any of the thinking. He does have support there from Dak Prescott, from Micah Parsons, from various people. Jerry Jones even talked about the idea that he could bring him back. We're talking about a proven NFL head coach who has won a Super Bowl and did have success in Dallas, despite the fact that the Cowboys didn't win in the playoffs. There were 3 straight years where they won 12 games each season in the regular season. There was a stretch where he was the winningest coach in Dallas Cowboys franchise history. So, again, this is the kind of season that when you have a year like this, these are the questions that come up. He's on an expiring contract. So I would imagine after a season like this, it's harder to imagine that the Dallas Cowboys would rush out to go renew that deal. But again, all things are going to be on the table here, and we'll see how it works out.
I think a lot of this is going to be circumstantial in regards to how the Dallas Cowboys handle their particular future. Wait and see what other coaches might be let go, what other college coaches might become available and wanting to get out of the college ranks. It's all about who's available. Is it better than what we have? Is it going to be easier to get back to the postseason than what we have? And it might very well be a yes or a wait and see answer for Mike McCarthy's future with the Dallas Cowboys. Again, the important part there and what Schefter said, he does not have a contract beyond this year, so they do not have to say, we're firing Mike McCarthy. They can say, hey, we're not going to renew the contract. We're going to move forward. Thanks, Mike, for everything you've done. A little bit better from a PR perspective if the Cowboys do decide to go in a different direction. Rams and Niners will be the Thursday night football game this week from Santa Clara, 7:15 on Prime Video. Niners are nearly a field goal favorite in the game. Sunday slate begins. Chiefs at Browns, noon on CBS. Colts and Broncos, Bills and Lions, Steelers and Eagles. 3 big football games for playoff positioning in each conference, all at the same time on Sunday. All 3 of those games, Colts Broncos from Denver, Bills at Lions from Detroit, Steelers at Eagles from Philly, are 3:25 start times on Sunday afternoon. Jeff Saturday talking about the manufactured drama that's coming out of Philadelphia and who is to blame.
Receivers, man, like receivers, right? It's a running joke. They're worried about their catches and their contracts, but that's kind of the reality of what receivers do. And I don't fault him for it. Yeah, I mean, when you think about A.J. Brown, he is a true one. And when I say that, everybody has a, quote, one on their team. A.J. Brown is a true one, meaning wherever he went in the NFL, he would be the one receiver. And he is a massive human being who gives matchup problems all over the field. But let's be realistic. Every offensive coordinator in the NFL, if they can run by winning, it is a low-risk, high-reward proposition.
And that is what the Eagles have done this year, running and winning the football. That's one of the best and most impressive rushing teams of the season. Eagles, one of the sterling records around the NFL, hosting the Steelers, also a team with double-digit wins, 325 on Fox. Sunday Night Football, Packers at Seahawks, a place where Green Bay and most teams have traditionally struggled. Sunday Night Football, 7:20 on NBC. Packers are a 3-point favorite. Bears at the Vikings is the Monday Night Football game. Minnesota is a touchdown favorite against the hapless Chicago Bears. Adam Schefter talking about the options at quarterback this offseason for Minnesota.
I don't think it's a big surprise that the two sides haven't spoken. I think it's a situation where the Vikings are going to let the season play out. Let's see how the season ends. By the way, like if Sam Darnold took them on some extended playoff run, do I think that they then would be having conversations? Yeah, I do. But however you look at it, I've always felt like the market would help determine whether or not there was any chance of Sam Darnold going back to Minnesota. I'd say it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to look to land a starting quarterback caliber contract with another team.
And Sam Darnold's contract, 1 year, $10 million. Could a franchise tag be in the works? Maybe a short-term team-friendly deal? We do not know the state of negotiations, if there have been any conversations at all. But according to Schefter, not too many going on right now between Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. College football Saturday, best game of the year every year. Navy against Army, Landover, Maryland, 2 o'clock on CBS. A pair of teams that are playing and looking the best that they have at this stage of the matchup in quite some time. Double-digit wins, either a reality or a possibility for both teams by the end of the year. FCS playoffs on Friday night. Idaho visiting Montana State, 8 o'clock on ESPN. Saturday, Incarnate Word visiting South Dakota State, 11 o'clock start on ESPN. UC Davis down inside the Dakota Dome in Vermillion against the Yotes, 2 o'clock on ESPN+. Mercer and North Dakota State from the Fargo Dome. That is a 2:30 start time, televised on ABC. Let's hear from Bill Belichick himself, talking about his flirtation with the University of North Carolina and what intrigues him about the position.
Really kind of patterned a lot of my pro teams off of the teams that I grew up around in the 60s as a kid growing up in the Naval Academy. But yeah, look, as a pro coach, you always go back every year and go to different schools and look at their players and see their programs and learn from those coaches and their situations as well. So, I've had a chance this year to take a longer look at college football during the college season as opposed to in the spring from the draft perspective. That's been interesting, as well as staying up with pro football. So it's been a good year for me. I've learned a lot So, I've had an opportunity to talk to Chancellor Roberts, and, we've had a couple of good conversations. So we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. A lot of times when folks retire from something they've done just about their entire life, coaching professional football, maybe you look for something new, a challenge, something different, something fun, something to keep you young. Maybe that's what's going on in the mind of Bill Belichick, as he has had a lot of talks with North Carolina, a 5-hour meeting reportedly recently with North Carolina about the future of their head coaching position. Moving forward, NBA basketball, just one game last night. The Knicks won in Toronto, 113-108. Tonight in the NBA Cup quarterfinal action, Magic at Bulls, 6 o'clock. Mavericks at Thunder, 8:30. Both of those games watchable on TNT. Men's basketball, Minnesota lost to Indiana yesterday, 82-67. And tonight, USD is home to Wyoming at 7 o'clock. Women's basketball, USD is at Northern Iowa. Tip-off from Cedar Falls set for 6 o'clock on ESPN+. And NHL hockey, the Blackhawks gotta win. Start the presses. Let's alert everybody. The Blackhawks finally get another win, 9-17-2. The record on the season, they win against the Rangers on the road. Final score, 2-1. Tonight in the NHL, Avalanche at Penguins, Bruins at Jets, Wild at the Utah Hockey Club, Blues at the Canucks. All 4 of those games in that order, streamable on ESPN+. And now, Major League Baseball, Jeff Passan talking about the Mets becoming a serious contender with the addition of Juan Soto. One of the other teams that got their feelings hurt because Soto spurned them is the New York Yankees. What's next moving forward for the Pinstripes?
The Yankees were willing, Kevin, to spend $760 million on Juan Soto. There are a lot of options that they have still on the free agent market. Now, none of them is as impactful a bat as Soto, but you have Corbin Burns, a frontline starter. You have Max Fried, a frontline starter. You have Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso. There are options out there for the Yankees to go and turn around and not replace Juan Soto, because Juan Soto, frankly, is an irreplaceable bat, but to make their overall team better.
All sorts of options moving forward for the New York Yankees. They were prepared to back up not one, not two, but three, maybe five Brinks trucks for Juan Soto. He heads over and joins the New York Mets, a 15-year deal. Moving forward into your Reliabank headlines of the day, we do have the first set preseason rankings from the South Dakota media for high school girls and boys basketball. On the boys side, AA top spot belongs to Mitchell in the preseason poll. They received 13 of the 14 first place votes. The Harrisburg Tigers received a vote. They are in the receiving votes category. In order, it's Mitchell, Washington, Lincoln, Huron, and O'Gorman. Single A, Sioux Falls Christian, Hamlin, Dakota Valley, Rapid City Christian, and Pine Ridge. And Class B for the boys, Castlewood, followed by Viborg Hurley, Gregory, Del Rapids St. Mary, and Wessington Springs. In girls AA, the top preseason team is O'Gorman, 3 first-place votes, followed by Brandon Valley, Washington, Stevens, and Jefferson. Class Single A, Vermilion, Sioux Falls Christian, Hamlin, Wagner, and Mapia Luda. And then Class B, Centerville, the top-ranked team, followed by Ethan, Sanborn Central, Parkston, and Lyman to round out the poll. More on that, ESPNSiouxFalls.com. South Dakota Coyote basketball returns to the Sanford Coyote Sports Center this week with a pair of games beginning tonight when the Yotes play host to Wyoming for a 7 o'clock start. Caleb Stewart is averaging double digits, 10.2 points per game. Chase Forte, second on the team, 13.7 points per game this year. A lot to love about USD men's basketball so far. Tonight's game can be found on Midco Sports Plus and on the Summit League Network. Wyoming leads the all-time series 8-2. Tune in there. Find more info. Go Yotes.com. Nace Langus of Augustana Hockey named the CCHA Rookie of the Week after a 2-goal performance in Augie's weekend split against Fairbanks. And fellow Augustana player right now, fellow Augustana student athlete Jackson Roman has been named the NSIC Wrestler of the Week, according to league officials. Roman started off Augustana's duel against Parkside with a victory over the 4-seed, pinned Corrigan in a minute 54 after initially logging 2 takedowns in the match. That was his first dual victory of the season. Jackson Roman, the senior from Tremont, Minnesota, your NSIC Wrestler of the Week. We take the break. We come back talking about that state out to our east, the Iowa Hawkeye State. Iowa Hawkeye football is on to a bowl game. We'll talk about who they've got, the keys and storylines for a potential win for the Hawkeyes in the game. And then, of course, we'll dip our toe in to men's basketball as well. A lot going on just out to our east in Iowa, in Iowa City. We dive in with Sean Bock, Hawkeye coverage for 24/7 Sports. He joins us next on Overtime.
Miss a moment of local college and pro sports action. Stay connected and download the app for Overtime on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO.
Right back with you on this Tuesday edition of Overtime. Absolutely flying through this Tuesday, December 10th edition of the program. You ever miss any of the show? ESPNSiouxFalls.com as your podcast links, as do the ESPN Sioux Falls free mobile app. Sean Bock of 24/7 Sports is our guest right now. We are zeroed in and all in on Iowa Hawkeye football, men's basketball right now. Sean, welcome back into the show. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Bert. Thank you for having me. It's been a nice couple of days here in Tifton, just outside of Iowa City. It's been on the warmer end, which has been kind of nice. Especially after how freezing it was last week. But yeah, it's been a busy time, but I'm excited to talk about it.
And certainly a mixed bag of a season for Iowa football. Couple really disappointing losses. Anytime you lose to Iowa State, regardless of how good and great that program was this year, could be construed as a disappointment. Lost to UCLA, kind of a black eye, if you will, as in addition to the Michigan State loss. But all things considered, 8-4, consistency, Kirk Ferentz, they go together very well. What are some takeaways and highlights for you this season for the Hawkeyes on the gridiron?
Yeah, I mean, you look back at that Iowa State loss, and I think that's one that a lot of people are thinking to themselves, like, they really want that one back because, to me, as an outsider, obviously, you hear stuff and, you can report on certain things, but you don't hear everything. Just as an outsider and just talking to people, it kind of felt like that game against Iowa State was kind of like, a huge gut punch because you have all these guys coming back for a fifth or sixth year. Their expectation is to make it to the college football playoff, compete for a Big Ten championship. After that game, obviously it didn't impact the Big Ten championship, but it obviously impacted the college football playoff. And, how Iowa, this kind of feels like, the college football playoff kind of feels like the perfect, kind of setting for Iowa, with the fact that there's 12 teams making it in. Obviously, the Big Ten is more loaded now with some of those teams at the top, especially Oregon. It kind of feels like still a chance, even if you don't win the Big Ten, like you could have a chance to slip in there. And, I think a lot of people thought this year that Iowa was maybe going to be like Minnesota, or not Minnesota, excuse me, was going to be like Indiana was this year. Mm-hmm. Maybe 11-1, 10-2. 10-2 probably would have been, kind of tough to get in depending on how other teams would have performed. But, I think they were favored in every game going into this year outside of that Ohio State game. And, you lose to Iowa State, and that's kind of like a big gut punch because it's kind of like, well, what are we playing for now? Like, obviously you play to win, and, that you never really know what the season's going to, what's going to unfold during the season. But it just felt like after that game, like, there was just a lot of big weaknesses that this team did not expect to have, or certain weaknesses that this team did not expect to have that, ended up coming to the forefront and ended up being a, problem in, their losses. I mean, Iowa State, against Iowa State, Iowa was prone to giving up some big plays in the passing game. That was the case against, Michigan State. Obviously, it was the case against Ohio State too, but the passing defense wasn't as strong. So there's just different things that felt like came to fruition that, I don't think a lot of people expected or a lot of people anticipated, but, that Iowa State game, I think, is one that a lot of people would have been thinking to themselves, what if Iowa was able to get that one? Because I think the season would have gone different. So, all in all, you're 8-4, you make it to a Music City Bowl. Caleb Johnson obviously has a fantastic year. That's something, the offense improves. You still like to see that passing game take a step forward, and I think that's one of the big things that Iowa's addressing now in the transfer portal. And, I would say that outside the passing game, like, you have a really good offensive line, too. Like, I would say the first year under Tim Lester went better than expected. But, there's still some things that you got to work on. And, obviously, you didn't get to the point that you wanted to make it to a college football playoff or at least being in that conversation because you were never really in that conversation throughout the year. So, I mean, on the positives, like I said, Tim Lester's offense looking better. You have some young talent on the roster, but you still got to replace a lot of that young talent, too, with the transfer portal. That's going to be a really significant thing to watch this offseason, too.
I think the average fan finds it pretty darn difficult, Sean, to keep up with the transfer portal. We're talking with Sean Bock of 24/7 Sports. You can find him on Twitter at SBock, BOCK247. What's the latest you can tell us? Who's in, who's out? Notable players. Cade McNamara will be transferring out, the quarterback hopeful for the past 2 years, injuries both seasons. And obviously the running back there, Caleb Johnson, will be heading to the National Football League. What other big names jumped into the portal and are set to leave the program this offseason for Iowa?
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things about this Iowa team is, like, there's not a lot of guys that they have expected to leave or guys that you kind of, like, think to yourself, all right, they're going to be gone. And I think that, is real credit to the culture that Kirk Ferentz has built over the course of his time in Iowa City, as well as the rest of the coaching staff. I mean, one of the notable ones was Marco Linus, who was third-string quarterback going into the season. He's entering the portal. Iowa's given him the option of coming back if he wants to, too. But I think he wants to see what's out there and, play and see what his market value is. Because, he's from the East Coast. There's plenty of programs up there that, take a really good talent like Marco, who I think, is still developing as a quarterback, but he's a pretty good athlete and, can move around a bit in the pocket and make plays that way. So I think he could be valued at some of these schools. And then, that's kind of the main guy that's leaving. A couple of walk-ons, too, in-state walk-ons, a couple out-of-state walk-ons. Not many scholarship guys have left. Defensive lineman Caden Crawford is one of those that did leave. There were a couple other guys that, have been kind of bothered by injuries throughout their career that, you kind of expected to move on eventually. But, they'll have most of their guys coming back that, are on scholarship outside of the guys that are, out of eligibility or going to the NFL draft. So that's a positive sign. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of, you said it's hard for fans to track. Heck, it's hard for me to track it. It's my job. They're really targeting the quarterback right now. Sounds like Auburn transfer quarterback Hank Brown is their top target at the quarterback position, or at least one that they have the most traction with right now. He's from Wheaton, Illinois, moved down to Nashville early in his high school career. Wheaton's the same hometown as Iowa offensive coordinator Tim Lester, so there's a little bit of a connection there. Obviously, I don't know how familiar they were with each other before, before they got involved with each other, but it's still something to know. Obviously, there's some familiarity there. So quarterback's a big need for them. I think wide receiver is more of a want than a need right now. Offensive line, offensive tackle is probably going to be a spot that they really focus on, or at least, see a potential spot for. I know they really like the guys that they have coming up. On the defensive line, they're looking at a couple defensive tackles. Jonah Pace from Central Michigan, he had 11 tackles for a loss and 5 sacks this year. For the Chippewas, he's a big dude at 6'5", I think 285 pounds. He would be a really good, guy on the rotation on the, interior of the defensive line. And he's taking a visit to Iowa later this week, and I think that's one that Iowa can really close down on. A couple other positions, too. I mean, cornerback and potentially safety. I think corner is more of a need right now, considering, kind of the, uncertainty that they had at that position this past year behind Jamari Harris. So, if you're kind of counting on that, I think there's like 7 spots that they're really trying to fill. Right now, 1 quarterback, 2 a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, 2 defensive tackles, and potentially two defensive backs, potentially at the safety spots too, or like at that cash spot. But they can also look for 2 quarterbacks depending on where things go. I mean, you have Brendan Sullivan coming back, who I think is really going to be probably the favorite right now for the starting spot. Mm-hmm. Jackson Stratton, who, obviously is still far from a finished product, but Tim Lester really wants to develop him. And then you have Jimmy Sullivan, a pretty highly sought-after freshman coming in, who's not going to be ready, in his first year, but I think could potentially push for that starting spot, or at least, compete for that starting spot in his second year on campus, which would be a real plus because, Iowa has not had a lot of success with high school quarterbacks since Nate Stanley, and that's been a really concerning trend that they want to snap, and I think they feel that Sullivan can potentially snap that. So, yeah, we'll see what happens in this portal cycle. I mean, I think, there's a lot of intrigue at the quarterback position, obviously, but, and they want to get a couple guys to bolster the roster at certain spots. There's a few guys at cornerback that I think would be really good fits for them that, I don't really feel totally sure about right now reporting on, but they've been talked about a decent amount from behind the scenes, and it'll be really good options for Iowa. And, it's going to be an interesting year next year because, the last 2 years you've had a lot of, guys coming back and like more experienced guys. This year, you have some experience, but you also have some positions where there's a lot of unknowns. And, running back, I think, is one of them. Linebackers, another one. They'll return a decent amount of the defensive line. Offensive line, I think, there's a couple guys leaving that, they have to replace, and they feel good about the young guys. And wide receiver, it was a little bit improved this year, but it wasn't really where it needed to be. And there's a lot of really young talent along with Jacob Gill, who would be an experienced guy in that fifth year role. So, yeah, this offseason is going to be one that's pretty fascinating. I mean, it's a tough schedule for Iowa next year, but it feels like when Kirk Ferentz doesn't have, those really high expectations, that's really when he does his best coaching job. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they kind of go about this, how they navigate it, and what kind of additions they can get.
Hawkeyes are 8-4. They meet up with 9-3 Missouri in the Music City Bowl. That game coming up on the 30th of December. And as of right now, ESPN Bet has the Missouri Tigers as a 3.5-point favorite in the game. Sean, obviously, we're off and running with men's basketball season, 7-2 the record. Give me some observations so far this year in the first 9 games, because game number 10 coming up in a couple days. Pretty big one against the Cyclones, I'd say.
Yeah, it is a big one, and I think a lot of people were encouraged about that performance this past weekend against Michigan. I mean, you would like to get that win up there in Ann Arbor, and obviously that stretch towards the end of the game where Michigan kind of pulled away. Iowa was obviously took a lead at one point, then Michigan got it up to 10, and then Iowa almost had the chance to win the game at the end. I think if you asked anyone else, they probably would have said that 3-pointer that Bryce Sanford shot in the corner could have been a foul because the Michigan defender did not really let him land, or as that new rule that rule goes in terms of like giving the shooter space to really land. And yeah, I mean this weekend will be, or tomorrow's gonna, or what is it? Oh my gosh,
2 days from now it'll be Thursday night.
Yeah, Thursday. Thursday's gonna be an interesting matchup because it's a very good Iowa State team, but it's a different Iowa State team. This Iowa State team is more of an offensive-oriented group, and while their defensive numbers look really good, they haven't really been that, as good as, I think people think on the defensive end. And as what we saw from that Iowa State team last year, they were an elite defensive team, and the offense was not there. Now it's kind of switched a little bit. So it's going to be interesting, but they still play really hard on the defensive end, and that's going to be something that Iowa, they had a hard time with dealing with last year because they weren't as good as a 3-point shooting team. And, the key for Iowa in these wins, against Iowa State is they've shot the 3 really well. They've spaced the floor. That's kind of been a common trend because if you can space Iowa State out on defense and, get past their pressure and avoid turnovers, that's a really big plus. And the thing about this Iowa State team, though, that's different, like I said, is they're a much more talented offensive group. And, we like what we see from Iowa's defense, but there's still some holes, and you're going to need guys like Peyton Sanford and Josh Dix to be really consistent, and even Owen Freeman, because I think Iowa State's big men are a lot more talented this year. And, Freeman can't fall into that, early 2-foul trap like he did against Michigan. And, I thought Iowa did a good job of combating that and staying in the game. I thought Riley Mulvey did a really good job at that 5 spot. And, if you can get Seydou Traore back for this game as well, I think that's a really big boost for this Iowa team because, he gives you that that resistance, that rim resistance, and just that more just presence at the 4 spot than I think Iowa has been, has struggled to get in the last couple of weeks, or at least since he's been out. So, yes, Thursday's going to be a big one. I mean, I think Iowa State, I think they're like, I don't know what the spread is right now. I think I saw in KenPom that Iowa State might be 8-point favorites. I think I could see Iowa losing by 5 or 6, but I think the stat is that Iowa has won the last 3 games in Carver Hawkeye against Iowa State. And I know this is a different team, different matchup, but if Iowa can shoot the ball like they're capable of and get some of those looks and play well as a team and defend better, I think Iowa could potentially knock them off. But it's going to be tough because, like I said, Iowa State's a pretty dang good team. I know there have been a couple national pundits that kind of see them as a wild card to win the national championship this year, or at least, be a really surefire Final Four candidate. So it's going to be a fun matchup. I mean, I think, you leave encouraged from that Michigan loss, even though they did lose. I think there were some good things that came to be from there because Michigan's a good team too. Let's not forget that they just went to Madison and knocked off the Badgers. And the Badgers were a top 15 team, top 10 team, and
we're undefeated.
Has probably had one of the better resumes in college basketball to start the year, outside of the likes of Auburn and a couple of those blue bloods. So it's gonna be an interesting matchup. I think if Iowa can hit threes, it matches up really well. But if they can't, it could be like one of those double-digit losses.
And that game Thursday night again is a 6:30 start time. Fox Sports 1. 7-1 Iowa State, 7-2 Iowa. One of the big early season barometers for both programs. Great stuff as always, and a extensive check-in on all things Iowa Hawkeye athletics, football, men's basketball. Sean Bock of 24/7 Sports. Sean, always great to hear from you, talk to you. All the best to you moving forward in the new year, and we'll talk to you again here soon on the show.
Yep, sounds good, Bert. Thank you for having me, man. You as well.
All right, Sean Bock of 24/7 Sports. You can find him at sbock247. We got to get to break here. We're going to come back with the latest news and nuggets from the National Football League, including a former Minnesota Viking officially let go of a relatively new team today. Could he be in time back with the Minnesota Vikings? We dive into that and more coming up next on Overtime.
It's so on the go. Download the free app now. This is ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you on this Tuesday edition of Overtime. Thanks for being a part of the show. Tuning us in as always right here on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO. Whip around coverage from the National Football League now, and we begin talking about former Minnesota Viking wide receiver KJ Osborne. New England Patriots officially moving on from one of their offseason free agent signees. According to multiple reports, the team is releasing the veteran wide receiver, is subject to waivers, and will become a free agent if he clears through that process. The reports characterize the Patriots moving on from Osborne as a mutual decision. Now I'm asking you, I know the Vikings offense looked great. 42 points in the win over the Atlanta Falcons, but we talked about earlier this year, maybe you go get Adam Thielen before the trade deadline. That never materialized. Thielen, a big part of the reason why the Panthers were in such a close game with the Eagles, playing really good football down there in Charlotte, despite the latter stages of his career. Would you welcome a reunion with KJ Osborne? I know the wide receiver 3 spot, Jalen Naylor and others, has not really been a big-time strength of Minnesota this year. KJ, if he clears through waivers and the Vikings don't opt to put a bid in and pick up his remaining contract, would you welcome him back? I think the obvious answer would be yes, especially if you view yourself as a team that could win a playoff game, 2 playoff games, a conference title, and maybe be dancing into the Super Bowl this year. Minnesota could use another option at receiver, and KJ Osborne knows the system, knows the offense, and had opportunities to step up and was a key contributor in past seasons in the purple and gold. Other news from the National Football League, the Kansas City Chiefs have signed veteran cornerback Steven Nelson. He unretired to join the team. 31-year-old began his career as a third-round pick of the Chiefs back in 2015. 13 career interceptions and 115 career starts, and now back into the league, signing to the Chiefs practice squad as of today. Teammate after teammate wished Jonathan Brooks well yesterday as the rookie running back limped through the Carolina Panthers locker room. The second-round pick out of Texas, 24 hours removed from re-tearing the same ACL in his right knee that he injured in college 13 months ago. He had worked all the way back to get to a midseason form to play with the Carolina Panthers and tore it again. Tough news for Jonathan Brooks in the start of his NFL career. Head coach Dave Canales saying, my heart is with him. I mean, just the amount of hard work that he put in to get back to this place, to get him to play. He's heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. The whole group is just feeling for the young man. And lastly here, tough news for the Cowboys. Linebacker and young playmaker DeMarvion Overshown did suffer a major injury to his right knee in the fourth quarter of last night's loss to the Bengals. Coach Mike McCarthy says it's, quote, of a serious nature and, quote, not good, with a source stating the belief is Overshown suffered more than only a tear to the ACL with 12:50 to go in the game. Will undergo additional testing today to confirm the severity of the injury. And lastly here, in terms of clinching scenarios this week, the Texans can clinch this weekend, as can the Packers, Steelers, and the Minnesota Vikings. When we're talking about the Vikings are in with a home win over the Bears. It is that simple. They can also get in with a tie, a Rams loss, or a Seahawks loss, or tie. So a lot of different opportunities this weekend for the Minnesota Vikings. The Packers are less likely to end the weekend with their playoff fate settled and confirmed. They will be in the postseason with a win, a Falcons loss or tie, and a tie between the Rams and Niners. So not likely that the Packers could wrap things up this weekend for a playoff spot. A lot of different scenarios, but the Minnesota Vikings win and in. It is that easy, and it's not just that. Again, if they do not win against the Bears, they can also get in with a tie, a Rams loss, or a Seahawks loss or tie over the weekend. Packers-Seahawks is Sunday Night Football. Bears and the Vikings is Monday night. Coming up this weekend, a lot of local flair in prime time. And in case you're wondering, or if you're a Chiefs fan out there, Chiefs started out noon on Sunday on the road in Cleveland, noon on CBS. We take the break, come back to wrap up the show with the latest and greatest in the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's next on Overtime.
College hoops and NBA basketball, the NFL and Major League Baseball. It's all here on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
It was a loaded show today on this Tuesday, December 10th. If you missed any of the program or just want to listen back to your favorite interview of the day, podcast links are not hard to find. You can find them at ESPNSiouxFalls.com or by downloading the free ESPN Sioux Falls app at the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Time now to conclude the show with a nice long look at the good, the bad, and the ugly from the sports world.
Who's been the problem child today? Displayed their ugly side, whined a bit too much, and is now setting a bad example? Bert is calling out today's headline makers with the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Time now for today's edition of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Everyone has days when they don't feel their best. You should never feel that way all the time. If you do, you could be a Cowboys fan, or you could have low T. Ditch feeling bad and ugly and start feeling good again. Schedule your appointment at Game Day Men's Health today. That's GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Starting out with the good news, the Colorado Avalanche looking to find a solution as a netminder on the roster. The preseason Stanley Cup favorite is now fighting for a wild card playoff spot as they seek consistency in the net. And they acquired goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood in a trade with the San Jose Sharks yesterday. The Avs received Blackwood and forward Giovanni Smith from the Sharks in exchange for goaltender Alexander Georgiev, rookie forward Nikolai Kovalenko, a 2025 fifth-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. The Avs also retained $476,000 of Georgiev's salary. So one of the new netminders there in Denver, Mackenzie Blackwood, coming over from the San Jose Sharks. Other good news, Michigan junior defensive tackle Mason Graham has declared his intentions for the NFL draft and has hired Drew Rosenhaus and Ryan Matha to represent him. We expect Mason to get drafted in the top 5 picks, according to his agent. Graham is the number 5 prospect in the ESPN NFL draft analyst Mel Kiper's latest big board rankings. On to the bad news. The Cardinals' rebuilding plan could potentially include a trade of star third baseman Nolan Arenado. Having Arenado remain a Cardinal is a possibility, but I'm not so sure that puts us where we want to be. That's according to team president John Mozeliak on Monday at the Major League Baseball's winter meetings. From a financial standpoint of trying to move our payroll, there are certainly other ways to do that, but dealing Nolan would be a big help. The 33-year-old under contract next year for $32 million, 2026 at $27 million, and 2027 at $15 million. That is called a steal for a contending team that is looking to squeeze the last juice out of Nolan Arenado. Other bad news, Wisconsin quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, a one-year stay in Madison. He's entering the transfer portal. The fifth-year quarterback appeared in just 3 games for the Badgers this fall and got hurt. A season-ending the injury against the Alabama Crimson Tide in mid-September. And the ugly news also involving college football and a college football quarterback, Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. We told you yesterday he has an elbow injury, injured his right elbow when he was hit while throwing in Saturday's SEC title game against Texas, and is exploring different treatment options with doctors. According to the school, the university said in its statement that there is no timetable for Beck's potential return. Georgia is the 2 seed in the college football playoff and does have a first-round bye. The Bulldogs will play the winner of Notre Dame and Indiana in a quarterfinal matchup at the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans on New Year's Day. So Beck has some time. How significant is the injury? We don't know just yet, but it certainly could be ugly. That's the good, the bad, the ugly. That's our show today. Thanks as always for being along for the ride and tuning us in right here on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO. We'll talk to you tomorrow.